I've got a list for you of the 19 graduate degrees that are going to deliver more debt than income for you, which is not a good thing if you're trying to actually pay back your student loans in a reasonable amount of time. If you're going to do one of these professional degree programs, make sure you go to a low-cost school, or you better have a plan when you come out. We're going to rank these from best to worst. Degree 1, becoming a nurse practitioner. This is a job that we've seen people typically come out with about $150,000 of student loan debt. And a salary for that profession, well, it can be $100,000 to $120,000, putting that debt to income ratio around 1.2 to 1.4, something like that. That's pretty good, and most nurse practitioners are making a pretty good investment by getting their degree. Our typical physician client is going to be number 2. Physicians, on average, for our clients, have had about $315,000 of student loans, and a typical physician salary might come in right around $180,000 to $200,000. Of course, that wildly depends upon the specialty. So physicians might have a debt-to-income ratio right around 1.5, 1.7, something like that. Certainly a lot of physicians can afford to pay back their student loans, or they can go for a loan forgiveness program like PSLF. Counting down our list, number 17 is a college professor. College professors can often have a lot of debt because they might take out debt to fund their PhD if they don't actually get funded at an institution, which is not good. So we've seen people typically have as much as $180,000 of debt on average coming into being a professor, and you can make a wide range of salaries as a college professor, but let's say that you'll make around $100,000, that puts your debt to income ratio at about 1.8. Number 16 on the list is becoming a dental specialist. This is a wide-ranging term, and that can mean that you could either become an orthodontist, an endodontist, a periodontist, prosthodontist, or some other specialty like pediatric dentistry. Most dental specialists have to go to training after dental school and take on additional debt to pay for their training. That's why the typical debt that we see for these specialties is around $600,000. $600,000 for an income that can, in good situations, be as much as $300,000 long term, puts your debt to income ratio right at around 2 to 1. 15 on the list is physician assistant. Now, like anything, you can go to physician assistant school and have a much lower debt than this, but our typical PA has been around $190,000 of debt, and a typical income might be right around, say, $80,000 to $120,000. So it does depend on the salary, but a similar 2 to 1 debt to income ratio for our physician assistants. Next is pharmacists. Our typical pharmacist has had about $220,000 of student loans with about $100,000 income. That 2.2 debt to income ratio is actually probably headed in the wrong direction because pharmacist salaries are decreasing while pharmacist debt is increasing. This is one I would be very careful in watching because it could easily rise in the list of the worst degree programs with debt to income ratio. Number 13 in the list is architects. Everybody thinks that architects are all Frank Lloyd Wright and make beautiful buildings and make a gazillion dollars, but that is not the case. You can easily leave with as much as $180,000 of debt from an architecture program, and a lot of our architects have actually had that very same amount. That is on a backdrop of an income that's typically around $80,000. A lot of architects do not make 6 figures in income, and that puts that debt to income ratio at above 2 to 1. Next on the list is teachers. Teachers do not need master's degree or doctoral degree programs to practice their profession, but those who do can easily incur monster student loan burdens. A typical teacher that we've talked to has got about $100,000 of student loans on a $40,000 to $50,000 type income. That puts that debt to income ratio right around 2.2, something along those lines. So obviously a lot of teachers out there with master's degrees owe a fraction of that, and that is what I would recommend if you're thinking about pursuing any graduate degree program as a teacher. Now, obviously, a lot of teachers could get their loans forgiven under public service loan forgiveness, but that would require you to sign up for that program instead of the poorly named teacher loan forgiveness program, which actually only forgives a fraction of the debt that PSLF does. 11 on this list is dentists. Dentists are the picture-perfect profession that has so much money, drives nice cars, and never works on Fridays. Unfortunately, the reality is our typical dentist is owed $380,000 of student loan debt with an income of about $150,000. That's a debt-to-income ratio of about 2.5. Clearly, dentists are going to increasingly be relying on loan forgiveness programs. Number 10 on the list is physical therapists, who must get a doctoral degree program to be able to practice. $180,000 of student loan debt with a $78,000 income puts your debt-to-income ratio right around 2.5 to 1, and that is a very difficult burden to pay back. Number 9, speech-language pathologists. Typical burden, $130,000 with an income that might be only $40,000 or $50,000. 2.5 debt to income ratio, give or take. Speech language pathologists need to be wide aware of what they're going to get themselves into before they do that profession. Number 8 on this list is lawyers. Lawyers can easily come out with a massive sum of student loan debt. $225,000 on average is our client amount, and then $80,000 incomes are very typical. If you work in a public sector job, you're going to make less. If you work in a big law firm, you might make a lot more. But regardless, becoming a lawyer is a very dangerous proposition unless you're going to an elite university, and even then, it might be tough unless you're in the top of your class. Debt to income ratio of 2.8 puts this on our caution list. Number 7 is veterinarians, who've had about $275,000 of debt from our client list, with about $80,000 or $90,000 of income, putting their debt to income ratio at over 3, about 3.1 to 1. That's such a high amount that a lot of veterinarians, unfortunately, are even having mental health issues because of their debt burdens and the other stresses in the field. For example, there are Facebook groups that are out there that support veterinarians going through extreme stress emotionally from their job and debt and everything that veterinarians have to go through. Be careful that you only can do veterinary medicine to be happy in life before pursuing this profession. Number 6, occupational therapist. This is a degree that doesn't yet require a doctoral degree in every situation, but it's moving towards that. Occupational therapists that do pursue those doctoral degrees can have as much as $200,000 of debt, and from our experience, they have a lower income ceiling than physical therapists do. So we see maybe about $65,000 salaries with $200,000 debts. That's about a 3.2 debt to income ratio. That's pretty high. Number 5 on the list is psychologists, with about $250,000 of debt from our list. About $80,000 of income puts this debt to income ratio at about 3.2. Psychologists tend to go get the PsyD degree, which is a professional clinical degree, which is almost never funded, and it also usually carries huge amounts of debt that are from private, a lot of cases even for-profit schools in some cases. So psychologists need to be aware that there are so many schools out there that want to give you that doctoral degree that will charge you an arm and a leg for something that you might have a difficult time making a 6-figure salary with. Number 4, optometrist. If you get your OD degree, you can be sure that you will come out with a lot of student loan debt. Our typical client has about $275,000 of student loans with about an $80,000 income, meaning that they have about a 3.4 debt to income ratio. Such a debt load is a big deal with all of the different factors that are happening in the industry that are making it a lot harder for optometrists to make as much money as they used to. Number 3 on the list is becoming a social worker. Social workers in some cases sign up for very expensive graduate degree programs that can leave them $140,000 in debt, with incomes that can often be as little as $40,000. In a social worker's case, the only shot you have to pay that off is to utilize a loan forgiveness program like PSLF. A debt to income ratio of 3.5 to 1 is no joke when you're trying to just be a public servant. Number 2 on the list is acupuncturist. Acupuncturists in a lot of cases have to get graduate degree programs in certain locations around the country, and they have a typical debt of about $230,000 on incomes that are often no more than $50,000. Unless you're going to start your own practice and you have to work for someone else, and that is not going to be very good for your income. We've seen some acupuncturists barely making $40,000 this way. Even if you do own your own practice, you have to pay for rent and overhead, and your net profit will likely be only a very modest amount of money. Finally, number 1 on the list is becoming a chiropractor. Typical debt would be around $250,000 with an income of about $50,000. That debt to income ratio of 5 to 1 puts the chiropractic profession in a category where schools are kind of like predatory lenders. You need to be extremely careful about what they're going to do to your future, and basically you cannot believe anything that a chiropractic school tells you about finances because of the ridiculous amount of debt that they're going to put you in, with very limited ways to actually pay that back with a degree that's economically valuable enough to afford to pay those loans. That's our list of the 19 graduate professions that could put you in more debt than you earn when you graduate. If you have other professions you want to share, put them in the comments, and let us know if you think we're totally off on these debt to income ratios. This list was compiled from the 3,000 clients that Student Loan Planner has had thus far, and if you need to get a plan for your student loans because you were ending up in more debt than your graduate program led you to believe, hit up studentloanplanner.com/help.